Welcome back from the break, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Independent Thoughts. For today's episode, I am joined by my guest, Ben, from the Skip the Noise podcast. Ben, thank you for joining Independent Thoughts today. How you doing?
I'm doing outstanding. Thank you for having me. Like I said, we conversed quite a bit prior, so it's exciting to finally be on, man. Get a chance to talk to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those of you who are not already, Skip the Noise is a podcast that I'm following on Castbox. I follow this guy on Instagram, definitely doing some good work over there. And, I think I'm going to get into a little bit, here in a minute, why I decided to bring you on. But, before we get into that, the first thing I always do whenever a fellow podcaster comes on is kind of ask them, like, what was the original motivation behind starting the podcast? Could you tell me a little bit about that? Like, why did you decide to start Skip the Noise?
Yeah, absolutely. So just starting a podcast in general as an idea was something that myself and one of my co-hosts, Mexican Nostradamus, had talked about for years, just both of us being a fan of podcasts ever since I discovered what they were. And hey, this is free entertainment, right? And I was always a big fan of talk radio growing up and, various genres. So podcasts just in general, very appealing to me and, easily digestible entertainment, throw it in the ear and go about your business. So it had been in both of our heads for quite a while to do something. But to specifically answer your question, as far as like, why did we decide to do Skip the Noise podcast or how we developed this format? So myself, Mexican Nostradamus, and Rick, the two of them went to school together. I grew up with Mexican Nostradamus, so we've known each other for over 30 years. Rick, though, they went to college together. So they knew each other, and I knew Rick, but probably right a little bit before COVID, maybe a couple months, the three of us had started this text thread where it would just always be like whatever news stories and things, and the banter and the back and forth. Rick having, generally speaking, conservative political views, and the other Ben having liberal views. It added up to be quite a good recipe for a show, right? You get both sides of the story, then you have my input, kind of man on the street take, if you will, or kind of the more of the sociological and analyzing things and break it down type of approach. So yeah, once we decided, it was the summer of 2020, right in the middle of June, and we finally just put the foot down and said, you know what, if it's not going to happen now, it's never going to happen. So boom, we just figured out how to make everything work. And even though we record remotely, it wasn't the most convenient process, and I'm not a tech wizard. So I had to, from ground zero, I just had to Google stuff, figure out how to do it completely from scratch. And, but we were so determined to make something happen that it just, it came out, and here it is.
Hey, you know what? And it's definitely, you got a good thing going there. I think one of the things that I really value about that you guys are doing over there is it feels like you're trying to emphasize that certain pieces of news get covered, which, something that I definitely want to talk to you about, because there's some times where there's just certain news that gets covered by the mainstream media that you kind of wonder to yourself, like, why are they spending so much time on that? Or like, why are they not spending enough time, covering information that seems more relevant? So just tell me a little bit about that. Like, how do you pick like what stories you're going to cover?
Yeah, absolutely. It happens a little bit organically, but I think by nature, the three of us are always kind of looking for those things that slide under the radar. I'm sure you, of all people, have noticed this, but I think the general public at this point is pretty aware that the mainstream media, no matter what network, right, each one has an agenda. And at the end of the day, that agenda is making money. So certain stories get play, certain stories don't, certain things get coverage because they, it's this overarching narrative that they want to create to keep the thing going. So, but outside of that, reality actually happens, believe it or not, whether it's covered on TV or not. So we take it upon ourselves to try to find the things that are actually relevant to life and how you're living your life and to society, whether that be politics, geopolitics, social issues, anything that kind of touches on that's important that we think our listeners are going to want to hear and get our takes on from a, hopefully a well-rounded perspective.
Yeah. And definitely, on top of that, it's also important to cover a variety of topics, which is something that I try my best to do, not to be too one note in my news coverage. And I noticed that that's something that you also do as well. Just tell me, when it comes to, I guess like this kind of goes back to the last question, but on top of picking relevant news, like, is it important for you to pick a variety of topics, or does that also just kind of happen naturally for you?
To a degree, it happens naturally, but yes, we definitely, you don't want to get too, for example, right? Whenever the election was going on with Biden and Trump, there's so much coverage on Trump's doing this, Trump's doing that, Biden's doing this. That was probably an instance where we did have to sort of deliberately try to find things that would add a variety, right? But I think naturally we just kind of sniff those things out. But yes, to your point, it is important to, sometimes you might want to talk about something that's strictly political, right? Like what is the House of Representatives doing on XYZ issue? But then sometimes too, there's local stories that might provide some kind of insight on what are the real people doing, or what do people think about things. So it's important to cover not only a variety of topics, but also things at multiple levels, right? Like what's going on with the executive branch, but also what's going on in your local, not only just, municipality, but like in your neighborhood.
Right.
What are folks doing? What is your next door neighbor doing? How are they reacting to changes that happen? What are they doing with their their door cams or whatever? So all kinds of different things make the show. And but yeah, it is very important to cover a wide range of topics to get different perspectives on.
Yeah, no, that's something that I'm very interested in, because I'm trying to fight back that motivation sometimes, because there have been times where I've wanted just to focus on one like genre of topics for too long. But I think one of the other challenges that comes up with being a podcaster is trying to get people to be engaged with the news or to stay engaged. I mean, because not only are you battling the algorithms, which are constantly trying to kind of push you down in results, especially like on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, but you also have to just try to like find ways to keep people engaged in politics, especially right now. It's the summertime. People are getting, on the other side of the pandemic a little bit, and people are just checking out of politics in general. So it's kind of an uphill climb more or less for everyone. But like, what do you like personally do to try to like keep people engaged with a political show, especially during this time?
Yeah, for sure, man. And I think, yeah, that's one thing. There's a lot of commonalities between, I think, you and I, and how we approach things. And yes, by nature, the stuff that you and I are interested in covering is is not going to be very algorithm friendly, right? Like just by nature, it's the stuff that they want to kind of sweep under the rug. So there's that battle, right? But hey, we got to fight the good fight. Somebody's got to. So to answer your question, though, man, I think the show in general, plus, how I approach Instagram, I try to make it kind of life friendly, and not that this is a deliberate kind of ruse, but I try to make things sort of sneak up on you. I'm a fun guy. I like to joke around. So I try to keep sort of the Instagram front, if you will, maybe a little bit more lighthearted and engaging, as opposed to, not to say that I don't push issues through that as well, because I do, but I try to just keep it like, hey, here's what it is, or here's what I'm doing, just to mix it up a little bit. But yeah, it is tough. But as far as getting an audience involved, I try to, and this is something I want to work on more in the future, is bringing people on, giving them an opportunity. Like, hey, if maybe you don't want to put your opinions on the comments, but hey, maybe you have something that you want to promote. So hey, I'll give you a chance to talk for 15 minutes or something on the show, or voice a concern, some kind of cause. So things like that, I think, are on the future as we get past year one. The focus initially, is just banging out these shows and keeping it, keep the development of the program going. But yeah, I think that, whether it's writing in stuff, I'm just looking to kind of expand the show a little bit, because yeah, it is tough. And I don't have like a perfect answer for what's been working, because it has been a struggle. I really haven't gotten the results I want on that front, for sure.
Yeah, and it's definitely something that I think that we all struggle with. I know that I spend definitely more time marketing than I do cultivating the show, which I'm hoping
Hmm.
that in the future I can kind of flip that around as it should be. But, you know, I think, the one of the next things I want to ask you is, because we're kind of I want to dive into more or less some of your political feelings as someone who hosts a political podcast.
Hmm.
But before we kind of like get into specifics on, certain topics, I think just the first question that comes to my mind is, you know, why did you like, where did this interest in politics come from in general? Because there are I think for certain people, they have like certain events that kind of like, sparked it for them. But is there something like specific for you, or kind of like has it always been there, like, for most of your life?
Yeah, I think there's always been an interest. I wouldn't say politics specifically. For me, politics kind of comes as a result of wanting to, I have educationally speaking, I have a sociological background. That's what I got my degree in, University Houston downtown. Shout out to the Gators. But I I look at things like that. It kind of all blends into the same thing. Politics is a part of society. Society is a part of culture, which is a part of, biology, life, all the thing. It all blends into one thing. So for me, politics is more of the avenue. That's how changes get made, right? That's what we've set up as a society to govern the people and the populace. So if you're not somewhat engaged in that, you're not participating in shit, man, your own life. I mean, especially if you live in a place like the United States, where at some point, right, there's degrees to which it's an illusion that you have, you have rights, but you've at least got to concede that you've got as good a chance here as anywhere else in the world to actually voice your opinion and do something. So, um, by way of that, it's always just been my interest in people and what people are doing, how culture works, and how that permeates into people's lives and their opinions. I love people, man. I love studying the human species, and so politics is an extension of that. And but as far as the show goes, uh, Mexican Nostradamus and Rick are just both of them are very into strictly like politics. Like they have a real keen nose for that. So that because of the two of them, getting after each other, coming from different views, I think that is kind of the engine of the show. And then all the other stuff sort of flows through that to kind of even it out and make it a digestible piece.
Yeah, and I think, just for just some little insider knowledge here for the people at home. We tried recording this episode, yesterday, but we were having some technical difficulties. And when I talked to you a little bit about this yesterday, you had mentioned that you had some experience in your life dealing with the unions. Is that correct?
I did. Yes, I did.
Tell me a little bit
Um,
about that and how, because I'm going to ask you a union-based question, after that. But how exactly did that kind of like shape your feelings around unions, just having to be so involved in one?
Right. And yeah, that it's good you pointed that out because as far as politics in general, yeah, that was really like I said, I paid attention in as much as I always made sure I voted, things like that, and I always had a little bit of an interest in it. But yeah, it didn't fully blossom until I worked that job and was kind of not forced, but just by the nature of the job, was forced to get a little bit active in things like that. Now, mind you, this was for the entity that was paying me. So it wasn't necessarily my own personal beliefs, but at the same time, it did sort of cue me into, okay, shit, there are some grassroots movements going on. There are people. It introduced me to a whole new crop of people that didn't really come across my radar, you know what I mean, in my social circle. So that was a good thing to see people that are motivated in that way. But what it did show me is um, there are avenues and there are ways that you can use your mind creatively to get people excited and motivated and inspired to take action, right? So that was
Yeah.
a good thing. But it also showed just unions in general that, hey, these are organizations as well, just like a company is an organization that are run by people. People have different motivations, right? People are sneaky, some people are good, some people are bad. Um, so looks can be deceiving sometimes, and there's sometimes a lot more going on behind the curtains or,
Yeah.
behind the scenes that are worth looking at. So I don't want to say it soured my taste on the idea of unionism, or definitely not of the idea of workers' rights. But yeah, there's a lot of history behind that. And, uh, there's a sense of, I guess, like any sort of entity, there's history behind it, and it grows in a certain way. And some of those things get taken for granted and removed and sort of dissolved from the initial inspiration that created it, right? And they just become works that continue going just because the engine's still running and the thing still exists and people need to get paid. So that was kind of it. But it did definitely kind of open up the door for me to see, like, oh shit, like there's some things you can do um, outside of the box and thinking differently to get people inspired to actually make a difference. And we did while I was there. I was proud to say, I'm not going to get into the details, but several things, and it was in my own community too, which was extra motivation. So it did really kind of open my eyes to, like, there are ways if you're motivated enough to get things done in your own community.
Yeah, and definitely. And that kind of like ties me into, I guess, more or less the question I wanted to ask you, which is, we saw this push for unionization down in Alabama just a few months back in regards to Amazon workers. And I kind of just more or less wanted to get your ideas as a whole. Like, do you think that more unionization pushes should be happening all over the country, or do you think unions are mostly bad, or like where do you fall on in this particular conversation?
Yeah, it's tricky because I do think that they serve a purpose. Now, whether the organizations themselves and the affiliations and the people that are in charge of those affiliations have integrity is, and I'll be totally honest, I'm not a real familiar with the actual outfit that kickstarted this deal in Bessemer, Alabama. I'm sure they're probably AFL-CIO affiliated, I would assume, but I don't know the people involved. However, I will say very strongly that the trend, it seems to be, though, that corporations like Amazon do continue to, as they drive these profit margins and all those motivations, they continue to get away with things because they're so powerful and so all encompassing. And hey, look what we were talking about this too prior, but hey, I'm guilty as the next guy, man. We got Amazon crap coming to the door on the regular basis. So, at the end of the day, is it really a necessity that, a stapler or a computer monitor gets to your house in 35 seconds? What's the expense of that? The pressure keeps building to where profits are driven so tight that, hey, what's the biggest expense of any company? It's payroll, right? You got to pay your employees. So you can keep them coming in. And I think the thing that bums me out the most about this setup or this model for how it works is that companies like, your Walmarts, your Amazons, it's in their best interest to keep a revolving door of bottom level employees, right? Those are the biggest numbers. So they want to keep them, whatever that wage is. They don't want them staying there for 10, 15 years to where they climb up and they're capped out. They want a new crop to come in. And the other reason they want that is because they set the standards so crazy that nobody can actually do it.
Right.
So perfect. Perfect. You come in and, whoever, Jonathan comes in there and he's just a human, right? he's a Homo sapien. So he's not a robot, and he does need to take a piss in between, running packages on the conveyor belt at a rate that's impossible to do. So that's why that model is set up that way. It's specifically designed so that they have a new crop coming in that never gets it benefits. They never get any of that. And I think that's where the problem is. You got to make money, but at the same time too, what's the societal result of that when you've got these companies that are evading taxes? You know what I mean? They're not having to participate in the same way that a mom and pop would be. It's not the same risks, but they're getting away with all this just because of the expansiveness of it. So yeah, to me, that's problematic. But
yeah, there's a lot of different issues in regards to not just Amazon, but so many of these companies. But yeah, particular to Amazon, not paying taxes, treating workers like crap. Uh, I mean, crap's kind of an understatement, more or less. But
Yeah,
yeah, some of the practices they have with more or less trying to get people out consistently. You know, I did an episode on it for those who were interested. Go back to season 3. I covered Amazon workers in Alabama. Definitely check that out. But yeah, we could probably go on that subject for a very long time. There's a lot of issues kind of coming around
easy.
Amazon. But, you know, kind of just staying in the theme of trying to figure out more of, you know, particular political beliefs that you have. You know, I know that you told me that you are, you know, Texas born and raised. And a
Absolutely.
lot of times when we're having conversations nationally about the gun debate, a lot of times they get centered around places like Texas.
Mm.
And I kind of just wanted to get your feelings on this particular topic. It's a topic that I haven't covered a whole lot on my show. So, in your mind, as far as gun rights are concerned, are you someone who believes that, you know, the gun laws as is are fine, or should we be expanding gun laws, or should we be, you know, getting rid of assault rifles, or like where do you fall in this conversation?
Right. I'm all for Second Amendment, right to bear arms, gun order. Everybody I know, there is a gun culture here in Texas. As is, it's not the only state, obviously, but it's probably the biggest state, right? And that's why Texas is kind of its own thing, and that's why a lot of these issues sort of end up at a crossroads here, and get a big spotlight to see how it's handled here by our government. But so recently, though, as of September 1st, a law was passed to where citizens will no longer have to, or permits will no longer be required for open carry in public for handguns. So to me, I don't think if anything, there wasn't anything wrong with the way the way things were already. It's already pretty permissive here.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to me that this was an issue that took precedent, and this was an issue that became such a focal point for the Republicans in the Texas government, particularly our governor Greg Abbott. So the problem I have with stuff like that is it's done for, he's up for election. This is political posturing, in my opinion, and it has no common sense, no societal value. There's organizations, that are extremely pissed off about this, right? And on the heels of, tons of mass shootings throughout the country, but specifically here, there was one recently in El Paso. So it's tough to say, you can debate that all day, right? There's a lot of factors involved in mass shooting. So I'm not just limiting it to that, because mass shootings, obviously somebody has to be involved. It has, and you get into mental health debate and things like that. I don't want to spend a lot of time on that, but just guns in general. I don't agree with the extreme stance that they've recently taken, and it'll be interesting to see what happens after September 1st, if there's more, gun related altercations in public. I don't know. The kind of the at the end of the debate seems to be, or the focal point, or where it tips is like, so is public, or are we safer in public when everybody, has guns? Because the idea is, right, oh, well, you can shoot down the bad guy. If you're in a grocery store and somebody decides to shoot up the place, oh, if everybody's got guns, they can just shoot I don't know if it's that simple, because that seems to be the argument from that side.
Right.
But if anybody has a gun, it's just like I said before, like driving a car, right? There's nothing wrong with testing you and see how well you operate an automobile. Why? Because automobiles can kill people very easily. Well, so can firearms. So why aren't these these barriers maintained? So I do think that there does need to remain in place that process. So I don't agree with this new bill, the what do they call it? The constitutional carry is what it's referred to as.
Which is basically, from my understanding, is just wiping out all of any restriction. You don't have to get a permit. You don't have to have any kind of concealed carry license. It kind of like takes all of that off the table, right?
Yeah, no gun safety class, nothing like that.
Yeah, that seems problematic. Might be the right
it
word
is,
there.
and it's unnecessary. I think the thing that I have the most beef with it is like, who was asking for this? Nobody. The public wasn't asking for this. The lobbyists were asking for this. And so it's a pure, like I said before, it's pure political posturing. And that's, that's the stuff that gets me fired up, is politics for politics' sake. Politics is for, managing the populace or governing the populace, not for these little games for you versus me or red versus blue,
Right.
team A versus team B. And that's where it becomes, it's a bunch of BS. So, it's a tough spot, and we'll see how it plays out, man. I don't foresee it going very well, but we'll see.
Yeah, the people of Texas ask for a winterization of the electric grid, and they get an Opie carry instead.
Yeah,
but
that's what I'm saying. We can't even manage. For those of you who don't know, Texas notoriously has its own electric grid, which is obviously not maintained very well, as we saw in this apparent once in a lifetime ice storm that happened, where they were seconds away from what I've talked to people that are on the inside of this deal, seconds away for the entire state going out
for months.
For months.
Yeah.
So you're telling me that that's not the priority? The priority is like in an already permissive state when it comes to gun control. No, that's the issue. We should be spending our time not fixing this damn power grid. So anyhow.
Ooh. Yeah,
that's politics, brother.
There seems to be some backwards ideology when it comes to what needs to be addressed. But I think one of the last things I want to talk to you about is, after this past year, I guess we're going back a year now with the protest movement that was happening all over the country. A lot of conversations cropped up about law enforcement, whether people were advocating on behalf of the police, saying your job is very hard and people should be more respectful of what you're going through, versus on the other extreme, people were saying we need to abolish the police. Some people talked rather about defunding the police. I think a lot of people were more or less just talking about the police in one fashion or another. Ending qualified immunity cropped up, in a lot of conversations. Where do you fall in this particular conversation? Like what are your feelings around law enforcement, especially after all the things we've seen in the last year, involving the police in this country?
Yeah, absolutely. And regardless of, you could, like with any issue, right, that comes across and is, media plays into it for one, but it's no matter who you are, you would have to concede that there's an issue, right? Yeah. With, the relationship between the police, law enforcement agencies across the country and, lower economic minority populations. It's been historically that way. And we're not even that far removed, mind you, from, pre-civil rights, right? Where the law enforcement was basically the physical barrier between minorities and specifically African Americans and the whites. They were the buffer, like they were the ones that told it, no, you can't enter here. So now, as far as like how law enforcement agencies should operate, that's a different question. Do they need to exist? Yes, I think they do. I think there needs to be people that do the job that police do, right? There needs to be an entity of people with guns that protect the public. Now, obviously, there's a lot of different options you have for managing it, and maybe it's not a one size fits all. Every community is different. States are different. Municipalities are different. Communities are different. But I think the main point is that the law enforcement agency should be a representative of the community in which it serves. So I do think, I don't know so defund the police is kind of one of those things where it's such a blanket statement that you can't, it's a nice little catchphrase. So that's why I don't like it too much, because it sort of glosses over an issue that's way more nuanced than just saying blanket defund the police, right? Because it's more where that money is going. So the thing I think about law enforcement, what I think needs to improve is, I do like the fact that there's a federal registry for misconduct in officers. I think the scrutiny needs to be there. I think that needs to ramp up. I think it should be harder for specific law enforcement agencies to protect their bad employees, so to speak. Because you look around the country and these agencies that have had problems, a lot of times they're not. It's just like a company, right? If you've got crap employees, they're coming in late and they're talking, they're being rude to customers, right? Your business is going to suffer. And if you're not addressing it, it's going to continue. I think that's what's happened. It's not, there's a culture amongst police officers. And I got the utmost respect for somebody who puts on a badge and a gun and goes out into the public, because anything can happen. I really do. It doesn't take anything away from that, but you do have a very huge responsibility when you do that. You've got, your job issues you a weapon that can kill people, and you've also got the authority to put people in a car and take them to jail. You can use physical force. So there's all these things that are presented to you that you have to take, you have to be responsible for. So there's a lot of things that need to change, but I think some key things, training can't be underemphasized. And what I mean by training is not necessarily all kinds of things, physical altercations, right? How to operate safely. Because a lot of times it is tough, man. It is in your position, and not the specifically Derek Chauvin, but there's probably cases across the country where maybe somebody didn't intend on hurting somebody, but they didn't know what to do. They got nervous, they got scared, survival instincts kicked in, and somebody ended up paying the price. But the more training in that, because that's worst case scenario, right? A physical altercation with a citizen, or a citizen with a police officer. Stuff like that shouldn't just be like, here you go, you pass the test, just like with the gun control thing. So I think the bar for people to get through, or the testing, should be probably more stringent across the board, to make sure that the people that are getting through, and hell, pay them more. Shit, if it's a more qualified workforce, and I'm all for same thing with like teachers, right? Why are we downplaying somebody who's got the keys to our children's success, right? We should treat them like, treat them like or according to the responsibility that they have. So training, but also the main thing, scrutiny, to where specific kind of good old boy mentality can't persist, to where certain officers are being protected by their peers. I think that's important. The fact that the public should have a forum for that. I know some communities do have, I don't know what the word for it would be like, but like a citizens overview board, right? To look at certain cases. But yeah, it's definitely a problem, right? It's a historic problem. And I think at the end of the day, it's a good thing that it came into the public eye. It's not a good thing why it came to the public eye. But at the same time too, once the media sort of storm blows over, now is where we're really tested, right? Because it's not on the news every single day. It's not on everybody's mind every single day. So how do we as as citizens continue to fight this fight and try to look for changes, or things that need to change, so this just doesn't repeat itself over and over again throughout history?
That is the $1,000,000 question, my friend. One that I've been asking myself for the past year. Will people continue to talk about the issues when they're not being blasted in our face every single day? It's really easy to talk about Black Lives Matter when it's constantly being, talked about every single day, for months at a time. But will you still be fighting for rights a year later when no one's talking about it? There hasn't been a police shooting that's all over your news coverage, and it's nice outside, so maybe you don't want to think about those things right now.
Right. Yeah,
So,
you want to go to the beach. Summertime.
yeah, so definitely it's a hard thing to do, to kind of stay engaged with all these issues, but I definitely do appreciate you coming here today and talking with me about some of these topics. For those of you who are not currently, how can someone find you on social media? Where can they find your podcast? Tell us where they can find you at.
Absolutely. The podcast, you can find it anywhere. Apple, Spotify, everything in between. Like you said, was it Castbox that you got it on? Trying to
Yes.
think of some others. iHeartRadio, Amazon. Hell, you can tell. What is it? You can ask Alexa to play Skip the Noise podcast, and she'll play our current episode. So really anywhere you can possibly get podcast, we've made that happen to where it's everywhere. So you got no excuse. It's everywhere. I don't care what phone you got or what app you got. Subscribe to the damn podcast. And as far as like the social media, Instagram is our main hub. I'm always looking to expand that a little bit, but I'm just not got only so much time in the day, work over 50 hours a week. I got 4 kids. The two, Rick and Ben, they work even more than me. So, and they got kids. I think between all of us, we've got Ben's got 6, 7, shit, like over 10 kids between the 3 of us. So we're busy people, but we still make the show happen every week. So Instagram though is skip_the_noise_podcast. So look for me there. If you got any questions, I'm always open. I'm on that thing pretty much all day. So,
Okay.
So check me out there.
All right. Well, everyone go check that out. And if you're looking for those links, they'll be in the description underneath. So just click into the episode notes, especially if you're on Apple or Spotify, you'll be able to click on the links there and go directly to the podcast or to social media links down below. So Ben, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. Hope to have you back on again in the future.